For those of you who are recidivists, the last time I sat on this stage, I think in this chair, I was afflicted by, I felt like the Pharaoh of Egypt, by a fly. It was an awful fly. Every time I started to talk, it was, and I kept missing it and missing it. And then you remember that movie, The Fly, in which there's a little voice comes out and says, "Help, help." I realized it was the late Truman Capote had come back. I have been persuaded to read, which I hate to do. I hate when other people read to me, too. But it seems to be in the cards that I must read a little bit. So I'm going to read a bit explaining the title of the book, which is fairly useful, and a summing up at the end. Point-to-point navigation. In World War II, I served as first mate of an Army freight supply ship in the Aleutian Islands, where the weather was so bad that we seldom saw the sun, much less moon and stars. That made it nearly impossible to use the compass to chart a course. Instead, we relied on maps where we had memorized various points or landmarks as guides, a process known by mariners as point-to-point navigation, a process with obvious dangers. We had no radar then. As I was writing this account of my life and times since palimpsest, I felt as if I were again dealing with those capes and rocks in the Bering Sea that we had to navigate so often with a compass made inoperable by weather. Now there's a very curious summing up, which at the end of the book, which we can chat about. I solved the Kennedy murder case, and I do useful things from time to time. Things of general interest, I like to call it. And there was a very funny book about me by a professor called Marcy Frank, and she's at the University of Toronto. American professors, by and large, are not encouraged to go after tenure through me. But I say that this is really the last couple of pages of the book. Professor Marcy Frank has flattered me by a comparison to Alexander Pope. So in ending, let me quote the last lines of the Dunciad, a poem I love. Lines that I learned voluntarily as a schoolboy. Nor public flame nor private dares to shine, nor human spark is left nor glimpse divine. Lo, thy dread empire, chaos, is restored. Light dies before thy uncreating word. Thy hand, great anarch, lets the curtain fall, and universal darkness buries all. In 1943, when I recited this to a classmate at the Phillips Exeter Academy, he was bewildered. "Why did you learn that?" he asked. "Because," I said, "it's bound to be apt one of these days." So it is half a century later. And so it is today, when I wrote the ending of the book and quoted those lines, and I gave the date, January 1st, 2006. Since then, we have lived to see the end of the Rumsfeld era. Yay!
Well, where do we begin? I was so terrified that I was going to be the fly there, Gore.
No.
I love the description of going across the room without your glasses somewhere and sitting on an ottoman, and it turns out to be Truman Capote.
I couldn't tell.
No. Is it actually true that when he died and you were told about it that you said, a wise career move?
Well, I told that to my publisher privately, and of course I had to read it every day for the next 10 years. I did send, I've got a good bit in this book about Johnny Carson, who was a great friend, and the only man who gave us satire on television, and no one, except I suppose Mr. Stewart now, is doing pretty well with it, but Carson was brilliant with the monologue, the opening monologue. And suddenly there was Truman. He's about to celebrate his 59th birthday. And he was staying with Johnny's ex-wife, Joanne Carson. And he dies there. It's a very sad story, and I was publicly grieving, naturally. Sackcloth, ashes, I do the whole thing. I don't just play around with mourning. And the word was spreading all around, and the newspapers were ringing me to see what I would say, and I was terribly benign. I didn't say much of anything. And then I sent Johnny Carson a message. I said, I promise that I'll die in your house. Just as he was cooling it toward the end of his life, living down at the beach, as he said, he said, I tried for 15 years that story of yours on air, and I've never dared do it. So now you know what Carson did not dare say.
I wonder, you were on so many television programs in the 50s and 60s and 70s, endlessly on Carson and other shows. How does TV look to you now when you came back from Italy and looked at American television?
Well, everybody's sick. That's interesting to know. But I mean really sick. I mean that 40-hour erection, which generally you send out for a new set of friends, but some people are thrown by it, literally. And just all the illness going on that we're told about, and everybody, at least this is Los Angeles television, everything is mortgages, If you are a homeowner
Yes.
and would like to pay off your credit cards, and you see these sly voices, and you know that house by house is going to be just stolen from the people.